You're striving to be successful. You're striving to do all you can and achieve all you can within your job. And there's many demands, whether it's travel, whether it's project deliverables, initiatives, presentations, all of the things we have to do. And the challenge with that, though, naturally can be balancing that, right? Balancing work-life balance. How are we showing up as successful as we can at home or in personal relationships, friendships, et cetera, as we are at work? And so this was really a good opportunity for me to dig in and look at that overall focus on balance, right?
I'm Jill Avey, a career success coach, and this is SisterSmart Leadership, the show that explores how women can rise from director to vice president and beyond by fully leaning into their feminine energy as their biggest advantage. Let's get you one step closer to the recognition and promotion you deserve. I would love to hear about your journey with the SisterSmart program. And we've been working together for about a year now, or a little bit over a year, and you've just graduated. So I would love to hear your experience from the program and how that supported you through your career journey this last year and how it set you up for where you want to go. Would you share with me, thinking back of where we started and what that journey has been like for you?
I'm happy to have this opportunity. It's been a great journey. And this, I think, allows me to think about all of the great progress we've made over the past year throughout our journey and throughout my journey through the SisterSmart program. Thinking back again, what kind of drew me to realize the importance of having the right guidance was thinking, how do I get to the next level? I've been in my current role for a few years. I work within a pharmaceutical division in oncology, or US focus specifically. And I was really at this point of thinking ahead to a crossroads. What is my next potential step? What is my next potential role? And ideally getting to that next level. And so throughout that, as I was thinking ahead to that crossroads, it made me realize that it really would make sense to have a focused, dedicated perspective. But also, I thought there would be great advantage to having an external perspective. I have mentors, I have thought partners within the company I work for, but I realized the value of having an external perspective to really help me evaluate my future pathway and my future options. And so that's what really, I think, led me right to the SisterSmart program. Additionally, in my role, thinking like in the role I was in at the time, part of it was thinking ahead, like I said, to my crossroads. What is my next role potentially going to be? How do I further my success within my current role? So last year, when we were getting kicked off within the program, I was preparing to lead a product launch within our oncology division. And there was a lot going on. And I was at the beginning part of that process, really, in many ways. But it made me realize that there would be value in having, again, external perspective counsel to help me maximize that experience to make sure I was being as successful and performing as well as I could within that role as well.
Yeah, fantastic. What do you think you've gotten from it?
Lots, to say it in a nutshell. But I'd say the first thing, it might sound easy or it might sound like an obvious thought, but I think it's worth considering that going through the SisterSmart program, the first major benefit is really having the dedicated time to really focus on your development, to think through many of the different questions and things that we pondered and discussed through multiple sessions, just to have that dedicated time. It's something that I think we all should do. We all want to do, but we know we get busy, right? We get busy with our day-to-day, with the deliverables. We have family obligations, right? All of those things. So really just having, again, that dedicated time. I think additionally, of course, there were many resources, learnings, of course, that were shared throughout the program that were super helpful that I never had gained access to. So that was incredibly beneficial to help me shape my thought process to be as successful as I can be in my current role, but also thinking ahead to what that next step looks like. And then part of that, of course, naturally was through our sessions. We had one-on-ones. And so having that dialogue, and oftentimes the questions you would ask me would make me ponder or think or look within myself, things I hadn't considered. And so that's really the big value as you're evaluating future pathway or what it takes to be successful, all of those kind of components wrapped up into one.
Oh, that's so great. Thinking about the curriculum, was there anything that stands out for you that was particularly important for you to learn?
Yes. So many components of the curriculum, but I think one is really to that point, right? So I was just saying one of the great benefits was having the opportunity to think through and take the time to evaluate, look into myself, do some self-evaluations. What are my strengths? What are my areas of opportunity? What are my passions? What drives me? What really motivates me? And those are certainly things I had thought about at some point tangentially, but the opportunity to really dig in and go through specific steps and experiences and exercises. So that was really through the first part of the program, the defining who you are. So I loved that. I won't say it was always easy because some of it certainly requires you to dig in and consider parts of yourself maybe you hadn't evaluated or thought through. But the difficult stuff can be what's most rewarding. So again, taking that time to dig in, utilize those resources that we really started the program with, helped me, I think, learn more about my values, my aspirations. And then again, the next question is to think through ensuring you're aligning to them. I'd say another component that I found a lot of value in was when we were digging into overcoming the busyness trap. You'll recall as we were exploring and going throughout the program, one of the aspects, and I'm sure this is true for many women, you're striving to be successful, you're striving to do all you can and achieve all you can within your job. And there's many demands, whether it's travel, whether it's project deliverables, initiatives, presentations, all of the things we have to do. And the challenge with that, though, naturally can be balancing that, right? Balancing work-life balance. How are we showing up as successful as we can at home or in personal relationships, friendships, et cetera, as we are at work? And so this was really a good opportunity for me to dig in and look at that overall focus on balance, right? I know we talked a lot about the various quadrants of thinking like, what's a fully balanced person look like, a happy person look like, and make sure that I'm not too unbalanced in one. And I appreciated the opportunity to dig in and consider, what does that imbalance look like? What is the impact of that? And to have those discussions and those dialogues. Because when I am too over-indexed on work, what is that impact on the personal life? I would give the example on the other side, but I haven't quite experienced that yet. But it was definitely a good opportunity for me to lean into. And the one other thing I'd say is I had the great opportunity to, at the same time of going through SisterSmart, to be able to, internally, I was going through a leadership development program within my company. And some of those same messages were tying or connecting at the same time as we were going through overcoming the busyness trap module. And so it really helped reinforce and helped me think about striving for more of a balance where I can.
So you did some of that work in your personal strategy retreat. We do want to share a little bit about how that retreat went for you.
Yeah, it was really good. So it reinforced the messaging. So as I was thinking through, again, the learnings, overcoming busyness trap, thinking through the various quadrants that we should consider. What I also was able to experience through my company's leadership program was we actually had an offsite meeting or a retreat. It was down in Florida. And they had folks come in that really were focused on health and wellness. And so we were talking about things that, everything around sleep and the focus on that, diet. And one of the other things that was really important to me that I learned through that program and through that process was they talked a bit about periods of, there's going to be fluctuation. There's certainly going to be parts of your work life that are a little more busy than others. And sometimes your personal life will be a little more busy, but there's going to be ebbs and flows. And so the importance is to recognize that while you may be engaged or even stressed at certain points, either work-related or personal, those are okay, right? There's points where you're going to be stressed because there's deliverables, but also that's where you can grow. But in order to grow, you have to have the opportunity to have rest or reprieve from the stress. And so it's during those periods that you really realize that growth from the stress. So I thought that was really interesting. It was an opportunity to dig into, again, not all stress is bad, but also the opportunity to have those rest periods are critical. Your body will give them to you if you don't, but not by choice, right? And maybe not at a time that's convenient. It's good to be able to take those times to rest. And that's where you'll experience the growth and then also be able to deliver and perform when that next stress period picks up.
That's great. I remember when you came back from your strategy retreat that you were thinking about shifting some things at home to make sure that you were being the mom that you want to be, because you've got twins at home and a husband, and wanting to make sure you had quality time with your family that was intentional. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That was one of the big things. And going into the retreat, they even asked us to do like a 360 feedback process. And I've done many of those before in my career where it's more focused on work, right? It's more focused on how you perform and what your peers and various levels of organizations have, what their perspective is of you. But this 360 was a little different in that it was focused on, yes, I could give it to some of the folks I worked with, but also my family. My husband did fill it out, children, and then I even asked my mom and other relatives. So the idea being to get a surround sound of your 360 perspective. And so what they leaned in and what the feedback that was provided was around others' perspectives on my ability to take quality care of myself as well, to get the rest I need, to have quality time with them, going back to the quadrants, et cetera. And so going to this retreat, I had those results from the 360. And there were some tough moments where feedback around not spending as much quality time from my husband's perspective as he might like, or my children's perspective. And what came out of that, and again, being able to go through this whole process of reflection, take those results in, again, not always the easiest feedback, but important. These are the most important people in my life at the end of the day. And so coming out of that, I had the opportunity to do some of that reflection. And some of it was around making sure my husband and I have more consistent date nights, for example. That can sound trite or easy enough, but it's important, right? It's important to be able to have that time.
Yeah.
To be able to have a dedicated game night, for example, where we're all getting together and we're playing a board game or a card game or something like that. Those were some things that I pulled into a plan moving forward for some of that quality time. And then trips. I do love a good vacation or a trip here and there when I can do it. And so being able to pull that in, and not something you can do all the time, but we did just get back from a really nice vacation. And so that was one that I was able to pull through. And again, think back about the advantages of it and remind my family of the advantage of it too for this quality time that we have. So those are a couple examples. I would say personally, I've always been good about exercise. So that was one that reinforced the message. I was able to stay consistent with that. So that's been good. But one thing I did definitely, a self-care area I was experiencing, and I know we had many conversations on this with challenges with sleeping, staying asleep. And you did share some great resources and learnings and readings. And so we talked through that. So that's another thing on a personal level that I leaned into even further around protecting my sleep habits, going into bedtime, and then making sure I'm getting enough quality sleep time, et cetera. And so those are things that I've seen positive impacts of.
That's great. And you were able to get a 3-week vacation in, which is impressive.
It is. Yeah, that was amazing. Partly, I think, because I didn't take all the vacation I could use last year just with the launch I was leading, but the 3 weeks were so rejuvenating. I can't think of the last time I've had that much time. And so it was so fantastic to have. Really great. And then, for example, the vacation I just took, I completely unplugged. I didn't bring any work computer, phone, anything like that. So the opportunity to really unplug is so critical, but I think was, again, reinforced throughout this process to make sure that I'm getting those recharge moments. So that way, when I come back, I'm refreshed, but able to give 100% when I'm back in work.
Yeah. And it's so impressive that you've been able to do that because you work in a very large organization with a very big job that's matrixed and a lot of things happening at once. So that really says something. It's not like you're doing something that's easy to get away and unplug with if anybody has a job that's easy. So tell me a little bit about, you were doing the corporate program as well as your own one-on-one program. And what were the differences for you? Some people are wondering if they're getting everything they need from their corporate program and not sure if a private program was really going to be worth it for them. How they complement each other and
The complement.
what was different.
How they were complementary is And again, I know I said this up front, but I do think it's really important to recognize that having dedicated time and resources and talent, such as yourself, to provide guidance and perspective is not to be taken for granted. And so that's something that both programs offered me at the same time, which is fantastic. Both, again, leaning into recognizing those benefits of to be able to be as successful as I want to be and I want to strive to be, I have to be able to have those moments to recharge. I have to be able to have those moments to make sure I'm taking care of myself so that I can take care of others and also deliver. And then also making sure that I'm being considerate of my whole self, that I can show up as my whole self. So that's taking in the 4 quadrants, right? All of the areas of our lives that make us a whole person. That definitely came through very strongly in both programs. So I think that's really important. It's a recognition of to be our best and to make sure that we can set ourselves up best for success to get to that next level. It would behoove us to make sure that we're showing up as our best self, and our best self is not just one area of our lives. It's a kind of a full spectrum, a full consideration. And so those were definitely some of those cross-pollination, I would say, of similarities. And then I think in terms of nuances or differences, so with SisterSmart, we obviously were focused on some of the opportunities, but the unique challenges that we face in the workplace as women. In my internal program, it was very much focused on really the function of the program was to take those who are considered top talent or high potential talent, I should say, within our organization, but are minority leaders. And so that was a really interesting ability to see it from both lenses. A lot of overlaps or similarities, right? Because there certainly are similar challenges we can face, whether you're considering a lens from being a minority or being a woman. But there's also some interesting nuances. And what my internal program did afford me was, because it was a group setting, there were multiple folks coming through it, it gave me that opportunity to hear their lens, some of the challenges they might be facing internally, questions, opportunity to consider things a little differently through their lens. And that was really valuable. So again, a slight nuance, but I think certainly complementary in terms of both programs I was able to go on at the same time.
Yeah, I remember when you came back from that one session, and it did seem like they were really complementing each other. And as you said, there was 3 different weeks that you went on your internal program, but then the one-on-one coaching was through the whole year. Did you feel like you got to dive deeper into things with the one-on-one sessions than you could get to in a week?
Yes. Yeah, no, I definitely felt through our one-on-ones, I was able to dive in even further. We had a whole year. So there was more time and we were having more frequent touch points. And also it was selfishly, it could be any topic that I just wanted to discuss versus a collective group. But I think it was nice in that, again, being able to go through both at the same time. Yes, we obviously dove deep into the SisterSmart modules and the programs and the work that I was doing through there, and questions and areas I wanted to focus on, right, based off of those learnings. But because I was going through the separate program internally, I could bring some of those discussions to you too. And we had some great dialogue around, again, those similarities, some of those complementary parts of the programs, any nuances, et cetera. And I think that really ultimately helped what we were talking about before on some of those areas I wanted to lean in on to make sure I was showing up as my best self, my full self. It just reinforced coming together, reinforcing both of those messages together was really beneficial. But to your point, I think us having more time, more frequent time, more consistent time, and able to just focus on me really ensured that we were able to deep dive even further. And I could help make sure that we were focusing on what was right for us, what was right for me.
And so tell me about what the biggest challenge was that you were facing.
So I'd say coming in, my biggest challenge was really, part of it was me thinking through where I want to go next. As I was saying up front, I joke that it's a bit of the, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which I think as a kid, I thought I would certainly, everyone knows by age 20, but obviously we're all still navigating our journeys and thinking through what that next role is and the role after that. And even if I know the role that's 3 roles from now, what's the best step to make sure I get there? I think that's my biggest challenge or opportunity, which was helpful for me to work through this program to take me to that next level. But I think going back to knowing that as a woman, and where the purpose and where you're great is helping ensure that my eyes are open to perhaps some of the nuances of addressing this big question as a woman. And what are some of those dynamics within the marketplace? And part of me thinks that I've been with my organization for many years, for 16 years now, and that's a bit of our culture. And so part of me wonders if it's a bit of that. But as we were digging into around, again, challenging status quo in a way that feels authentic to me, but we know that's important for high levels or within an organization. And so what we had chatted about in terms of potential dynamics, and this was really helpful through our work through SisterSmart, but also certainly came up in my internal program because, again, we're thinking through things through the focus of leaders of color within the organization, whether it's challenging status quo, whether it's raising issues on a given project or something that we're working on, is as a woman or as a person of color, sometimes, and I did dig in and realize that this was a bit of what I was thinking through or considering and what might have been holding me back at certain points of being a challenger, would be some of those stereotypes that might face us. So as a woman, sometimes those can be around, if you're challenging too much, are you seen as aggressive or a complainer and not wanting to lean into that? And then as a woman of color or a person of color, there's some of those stereotypes of like the angry Black woman. And so not wanting to lean into that. So it was really helpful to go through the process and dig into that and realize that was under the surface, right? I'm not sure if I consciously thought about that, but as I was digging in, and again, it's just, these are common things I was hearing within our internal program as well. And so it was great to call it out. And also the feedback I got when I was discussing internally with some of my other colleagues was that I would not be seen at risk of being deemed angry or being deemed aggressive, just given my personality or dynamics. And so that's enabled me to lean in even more, again, in a way that feels authentic to me. I'm never going to be the person pounding my fist on the boardroom or anything like that, but in a way that helps me to get my point across, but in a way that's authentic for me.
Yeah. And we brainstormed a lot of different ways that you could push that envelope a little bit and not that was still authentic to you. So I think that was some good work. You also were working a lot on this next step for you. Now, after the launch, you were ready to start looking at what were the next steps up to senior director. And that's been a real journey for you. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yes, that has been quite a journey. In our organization, we, again, from a marketing organization or a pharma organization, we highly value, as many do, I think, this ability to excel at strategy. And that's what marketers do. We own the strategy. And obviously that pulls through into resources we develop, either for the field or through non-personal promotion, et cetera. And historically, I've had a lot of roles and I've really loved that strategy. And that's why I'm in marketing at the end of the day. I really came up through global marketing. So I spent a lot of time in global. I did do some sales years ago and market access as well, but I really love that strategy component. And as I was thinking through the next step, the next roles, and knowing my future role of a VP of marketing, one of the areas that through this program we talked a lot about, and obviously through some internal discussions with sponsors and mentors internally within my company as well, is recognizing that I think what we come down to, and many companies probably are the same, is yes, that strategy is really important and demonstrating excellence there. Leadership obviously is important as well. And so whether that's direct leadership of a team, larger team, maybe managing people leaders as well, right? So being able to demonstrate success there. And I think the other thing that really is important that's come through is execution, that ability to demonstrate that you've impacted business results, and whether that's net trade sales or some other measure. And so throughout this process, where I was leaning up front, right, was knowing I love that strategy component, and whether that's going back to global or staying within US. So those were some of the the dynamics I was considering. But recognizing, again, through many of these, maybe some soul searching and through our discussions and through some of those internal ways of working really within my organization, realizing that it's not enough to lean so heavily just on the strategy, the marketing strategy or market access strategy. And so making sure that I'm well-rounded on the execution and even more on the leadership side. So I have leadership, but again, if you're getting through a really large team or some of those dynamics of managing people leaders where you can manage through the distribution curve of higher performers, middle performers, lower performers even. Mm-hmm. And so where I've been moving forward, recognizing that would be a good area to ensure I have experience with is more leaning to a sales leadership position. I know they're called different things in different organizations, but again, essentially it's a regional leader, regional business leader that heads up a good portion of the country, their sales force. And so thinking through that, knowing that would give me that full spectrum. I really do have the marketing strategy, a lot of experience, many years there. I have a lot of the breadth across our sectors, whether it's med tech or pharma now. I even have global public health and commercial, so a lot of different experiences. But what this next role would help me get is that broader people leadership, but again, that execution. And that would really give me that full spectrum, the triple threat maybe, to make me super competitive for much higher leadership roles within the organization in my future.
There's a work-life balance ramification to this, isn't there?
Yeah. That was a lot of our dialogue for sure. The funny thing was, we were just talking about part of our learning with avoiding the busyness trap. And as I was going on the retreat in my other program, the part was really ensuring that I'm leaning in on ensuring I'm balancing and not showing up as my full self, et cetera. And so one of the things I was really considering to make sure I wasn't going against that, if I'm, again, leaning into this sales role, is the travel. And recognizing that if you're responsible for a region of the country, you're going to need to travel more. And so that was something I definitely weighed and grappled with quite a bit. And I know we had lots of discussions there too. And so part of it is, it's not that I don't travel now, even though I'm in-house. So part of it's that. And I do go into the office 3 days a week. And so there's travel, certainly that's going into the office there. But thinking through how would that work for my family and how would that work for my family in this new me, that I'm trying to make sure I'm showing up more balanced. So it necessitated a good kind of heart to heart with my husband. Obviously, he and my children are most important. And so where we were leaning is just to recognize it. I think it's important to discuss it openly and be candid about what it could look like, to recognize that it wouldn't be forever. It would be a given amount of time. I think the other thing, though, that really helped, I started setting up a lot of one-on-ones and conversations with folks who had done the role or are doing it now as well, particularly women, and try to just understand a bit. How did they manage? What did it look like? Is it as much travel as I was fearing? And so the nice thing I was hearing with that is, yes, there is travel, but there's the opportunity to make your schedule yours because you are a leader, right? You would be a sales leader. And so there's points where you can, if you do have to be out a week, maybe you can consolidate certain visits together and then the next week wouldn't have to look so crazy or not travel at all. So there's ways to balance it a bit. And so that was encouraging when I was having those conversations with sales leaders, just to see again how it worked for them. And they said, yeah, I know you really can make it work for you, make it work for your family. It didn't seem too overbearing. And then again, the other thing I hadn't considered up front was the level of travel I do now. And so knowing that already is accounted for was helpful.
True. And I thought it was really interesting how you went through this journey where you were originally really trying to figure out what were the alternative routes to this so you wouldn't have to take this step, and that you ultimately decided it wasn't worth the risk and that this was really a piece that leadership was going to want to see from you. Any other thoughts on how that went?
Yeah. And again, that part of that was me knowing that I was trying to make sure I was showing up as my full self. And again, if I was coming away with this initial lesson of wanting to make sure I'm showing up for my family and ensuring I wasn't flying in the face of that. But to that point, I did have a lot of conversations with folks internally. So even before I was having meetings with the sales leaders I was just mentioning to see what it actually looks like, a day in the life. I did have a lot of conversations with leaders just to, again, learn about their paths. What did they do? Whether they had taken this particular role or if they took other roles. Are there other things I should consider? Other parts of the organization or team? What are those potential next steps for those types of roles? So those were conversations were really enlightening and helpful in terms of helping me get to the decision I'm at now. Ultimately, my takeaway and the decision I've ultimately landed on for next path and journey was that it's not that it's impossible, but it's that it certainly makes it much more difficult. Do I want to have to try to be a unicorn for every next role that I'm interviewing for, right? And have to find that perfect one role with the hiring manager that may not see the sales leadership exactly the same way. So that was part of it, just recognizing that it would just continue to be an uphill battle to move up the organization. It was a good wake-up call. I think the other realization through those conversations was recognizing, again, the difficulty and not necessarily being as competitive against folks who have done these sales leadership roles. And if I'm going to continue to compete against them, will I win? Will I be able to stand out each time? And then knowing that the higher you go up the ranks, it's only going to get harder. There's fewer roles. The higher you go, they're even more competitive. And by the time I get to that point, 90% of the folks that had this sales leadership experience, am I blocking myself out from potential future advancement, et cetera? So a lot of those were my considerations and discussion points. And I was talking about that with my husband too, and he was aligned.
That's really great. You got all the support from all around you for that move. That's great. Something I like to ask every guest is, I feel like we all need a woman to look up to. And I'm wondering if you could share somebody that you look up to for your leadership model or muse.
Yeah, I've been fortunate in the 16 years I've been at my company that I've had a number of great women leaders to look up to and peers. So that's really enabled me. I think that's been fortunate. And whether they were official mentors or sponsors or just colleagues that I was able to learn from. But one that comes to mind in particular is my current sponsor, actually, who heads up our global, she just got promoted. So she's now our global lead, all of global marketing, the whole organization reports up into her, and she's our group chair for that whole organization and team. And she's been with our company for many years. Our paths actually crossed way back when I was on the med tech side before I joined pharma, and had the opportunity, I think back when she was a VP, and then have just been able to watch from afar and see her growth and development. The great thing first is that through the program I was mentioning that I was able to be put through the leadership program this past year, what they do is they actually match you with an official sponsor. And I was fortunate enough, very fortunate to be matched with her. It was great to get reconnected on a deeper basis. And so aside from her success and achievements, that's been super impressive, is her authenticity. You wouldn't necessarily think of her any differently. She treats everyone the same, which I highly value. I think that's so critical. Super authentic, engaged, and down to earth. And she actually has a super high emotional intelligence, which I value as a leader. And I think really comes through as a woman. I think that's important. And it's something, a value we can bring to the workplace. It's something that sometimes maybe we might be scared to bring fully to the workplace. But I love that she's not afraid to do that. And so she brings her full self and brings that value to the team and everyone she works with.
What advice would you have to women who are trying to develop mentors and sponsors as to how to find them and how to be a good mentee or sponsee?
I think it's important to, well, one, to establish the relationship, to establish the rapport, and whether that's an official program, because I know some companies have programs, like I just mentioned. I was lucky enough to be paired with an official sponsor, but we know oftentimes those are informal relationships as well, and probably more often than not as mentees or sponsees. So establishing that relationship and that rapport. I think the other thing that's important, recognize the value and the importance of that relationship, and knowing that a sponsor is someone who will hopefully speak well of you when you're not in the room, and whether those are hiring decisions or talent conversations, having an advocate for you, whether you're looking for a new role or whether, again, they're just thinking future forward. Making sure that you understand that dynamic and you're able to show up as your best self with that sponsor or that mentor. So what does that look like? For me, I think it's around making sure we have the one-on-ones, right? And so what's the right cadence of those, which has to be determined. We're on a bi-monthly basis right now for my sponsor, but also that I recognize the value of that time. And so I'm ensuring I'm prepared and I'm thinking ahead of what's going to be most beneficial for that discussion, what's timely, but also thinking through what might be beneficial for her. Is there anything she wants from our discussion as well? So it's not just a one-way benefit or a one-way engagement. We had this discussion up front around giving them the feedback, like what's going on within the teams, right? Because sometimes that's not going upstream. And so being able to share that voice, I think, is one of the great benefits that we can provide as sponsors. Again, recognizing that it should be a two-way benefit at the end of the day. And I think upfront, especially if it is a more formal relationship, as I was able to do through the program, I think it's really important to have a dialogue up front around like, what are your expectations? What's your goals to get out of this relationship? And again, on my side, but also on her side. And so setting that up front is really great, and establishing a personal rapport. And that can be something that takes a little time for sure, as you have more meetings and more one-on-ones, but having that person know not just your accomplishments, but who you are as a well-rounded person. I think that's important too.
Yeah. And how about the informal ones that you had quite a networking strategy as you've been launching into your what's next exploration? Any advice there on kind of the mentor side?
For me, it's been important to think through a bit strategically, right? Who I should connect with informally. So whether it was, I mentioned I was having a lot of conversations with folks and I was thinking through what might those other pathways be. So that was strategic in terms of reaching out to some people, maybe in a part of the organization that I wanted just to learn more about. So being strategic, and folks are always so open and happy to share and to meet, which has been fantastic. So there's that. Showing up strategically, again, being respectful of time. I make sure I don't set up an hour versus like 30 minutes because we're all busy, right? And certainly if it's high level people in the organization, just being realistic and respectful of their time. Having a good couple questions, right? Obviously you want to come prepared. That's really important. So they feel some value there. And so I would always make sure I introduce myself if I hadn't met them before, or if we had a further relationship or rapport. So they got a sense of who I was. Sharing a one-pager that's not just the work, it's work and achievements, but it's also a little bit about who I am. Because my goal was to also have that leader walk away with a better understanding of like who I am authentically. What makes me unique? What values do I bring to my organization? And so that was really important. And then, like I said, a couple good questions to think through the dialogue. And everyone was so nice and so receptive with that approach. And the other thing I'd say is, after that first meeting, I think the most difficult sometimes can be, well, what do I do now? The first meeting might be easy because it's an intro, or it's, hey, I want to learn more about your organization or your team, but then what? And so what I always did at the end of that call, or towards the end of the call, was got an assessment of if things had been, we vibed well, or there was follow-ups, or if I definitely could see I wanted to continue to engage with this person, which was 9 times out of 10, then either they would already offer, let's stay connected. Maybe we can touch base in a quarter, or maybe I'd put it out there. And again, folks are so receptive. But again, to think through like, what are those potential follow-ups from the discussion that could make that next connection logical or easy. In many cases, we had such good discussions that they were suggesting, oh, I'd love to hear more about that. Or I had shared my pathway. And so they were very interested in one of the organizations I used to work on. And so a follow-up meeting would be for me just to tell them about that. So that was great. And again, that helped continue the dialogue as well. And so what I've been doing is more or less on like a quarterly basis, retouching base with them. It helps to stay connected, but also my company is so strongly based on networking and networks. A popular expression I heard was your network is your net worth. And so I think that's so true. And making sure that authentic networks were staying connected and engaged. And I'd say lastly, one of the things I did following your advice was I started to actually spreadsheet my meetings just to keep track of who I've been connecting with And then that helped with the dates. And then that way I could be like, oh, okay, it's probably around time. Maybe I can start to set up a retouch base with person X. And so that was really helpful just to keep track for myself. And I even, to the point of the gift of being able to ensure you're like focused on your development and your network. Sometimes you just have to set aside the time to do it. And so I set aside time on Friday afternoons, where I literally put a block on my calendar where it's like, yes, I'm closing out some business things, but this is my time where I'm making sure I set X number of one-on-ones for the following couple of weeks. And so that helped me make sure, like build a muscle memory for it, so that I was ensuring I was actually living into what my goal was.
You've done such an amazing job with that. You're a good example for anybody to follow in how you've done that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this discussion. I know you're going to be so inspiring to the people who are watching this in our audience. It's really fun to hear your story again. And even though I'm living through it, it's always fun to hear it again. So I want to let our listeners know that they can learn a little bit more about the SisterSmart program by going to SisterSmart.com and downloading the private podcast, which is the 7-step passport to promotion. That's what Nadia has just gone through. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that. So I would love to hear, if you are watching this on YouTube, to let us know in the comments what you learned from this discussion and what you're taking away from Nadia's journey. And if you like learning about women's leadership and you like these topics, I would love for you to subscribe and follow us wherever you like to hear your favorite podcasts, because I'm on a mission to help more women get into leadership and stay there. So if that's aligned with you, I would love to have you on this journey. And thanks so much for being with us today, Nadia. If you're ready to fully lean into your feminine leadership and get promoted from director to vice president and beyond, hit that subscribe button so you'll get all the episodes to come. And check out the recommended video here to see how women are rising up without playing by the old rules that built these male-dominated industries and systems.